Almost everyone who dreams about retiring abroad imagines the same thing. They picture selling the house and moving to one country for good. But that's just one of 4 ways to do it, and most people have never heard about the other 3. So today we're going to look at the 4 ways to retire abroad and the benefits and downsides of each one. My name is Ben. I left Germany back in 2020 and I've lived in 7 countries since then with 5 residencies along the way. I've done 3 of these 4 paths myself, so I know what each one feels like in real life. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through all the 4, and by the end, you know which one fits the life that you actually want to live abroad. If you're over 50 and you're thinking about moving abroad in the next few years, then this video is for you. So the first part is the one that most people know, and I call it the classic expat. The whole idea is that you move to a single country and make it your permanent home. You get a residency visa and you sign a lease, you open up a local bank account and you move to the country full time. This path suits people who want a steady routine, they want a doctor who knows them by their first name, and they want to fully integrate into one country's system. The mistake that I see most often that people make the country choice too fast. Someone spends, let's say, 2 weeks on vacation, they love the place, and then they start to look at apartments before they even finish their holiday. But 2 weeks is not enough to get to know a place properly. I would spend at least 60 to 90 days because that is when the excitement fades and you settle into a more ordinary lifestyle, not the vacation lifestyle where everything is great. Once you have done that, and you can make an informed decision on that country and you can become a full-time expat, and it can be a great choice. In many places, residency also gives you access to public healthcare or lets you buy a property. And also, depending on your visa, you can slowly work your way towards citizenship. The downside is that now you are inside one country's tax system. And if you live there most of the year, you usually become a tax resident. What that means depends on the country. Some countries will tax your worldwide income once you live there, for example, Spain or Portugal, or most other of the European countries. Others, like Panama or Costa Rica, for example, they only tax what you earn inside the country. So a US pension, for example, is not going to be touched. So 2 things to take away from this. Number 1 is make sure that you don't just stay for 2 weeks before you decide on a country. And number 2 is know what kind of system you are opting into when you become a full-time expat. And then it includes considerations about your healthcare, about your banking, and also especially about your tax situation. If committing to one country feels like too much, the second part is called snowbirding, which means you spend part of the year where you already live and part of the year somewhere warmer or colder, depending on your preference. So you're moving between your US base and your new base depending on the seasons. The classic example is Americans who, for example, leave winter for Mexico or Costa Rica, and plenty of Europeans do it in a similar way. For example, flying down to Spain in November and then coming back home in March. It can also work the other way around to escape the heat instead of the cold. So I did that, for example, when I was living in the UAE, when I was leaving during the hottest months in July and August, and I went, for example, to Southeast Asia or Japan. The upside of the strategy is that you keep your house in the US and you keep your doctors and you still have all your friends in the US. And at the same time, you can kind of try out living abroad without making a permanent commitment, like getting a long-term residency visa or opting into a new tax system. Also, you're more than just a tourist because you're actually spending a few months there and not just a few weeks. So you're actually getting to know the place. The downside is you're paying for 2 homes instead of 1. So you're keeping your US house full time, and then you also have to pay rent or maintenance cost or whatever if you're buying a new house in the new place. Then you have to pay for flights and for things like international health insurance, so the costs can add up quite quickly. But if your finances allow for that kind of strategy, it's a nice way of testing a new place without committing to a new system fully. Now, what if you don't want a home base at all anymore? If you are rotating through a small group of countries and spending a few months in each one on a rotating basis, you might want to call yourself a Slowmad. You might have heard the term Nomad or digital nomad, not Slowmad, and I will explain the difference in the next strategy. So a Slowmad rents everywhere. You might take a furnished apartment or a longer Airbnb. You show up with your suitcases and then you also leave with your suitcases a few months later. This suits people who haven't found one place they want to commit to, but they also don't want to keep a home base in the US. The upside is that every place feels a little more familiar the more often you come back to it. Also, if you do it in a clever way and you don't stay long enough to become a tax resident, you will not opt into the system fully by just staying for a few months. In some places, it's easy because you can get a visa exemption for a few months or just an easy visa that allows you to stay for a while. The downside is that there's a lot of logistics. Every 3 months or every 4 months, depending on your strategy, you're booking flights, you're sorting out visas, you're finding apartments, and then you have to set up everything all over again in that new place. Close friendships are a little bit harder to maintain because you're not there for most of the year. And since you're not opting into any of the systems, you also cannot take advantage of them. So you need to make sure that you, for example, have a solid international health insurance. insurance. And if even a handful of regular countries feels too planned out for you, there's one last path, and it's called the full nomad life. So a Slowmad at least has a set of places they keep returning to, but a nomad doesn't necessarily even do that. You keep moving with no fixed plan and no base anywhere. You can still settle somewhere for a while, but you're not committed to the same rotation of cities over and over again. This is the most extreme version of retiring abroad, and it suits a very particular kind of person. I've lived this way for over a year. It was exciting and a lot of fun, but it was also quite exhausting in the end. I made a lot of memories, but I would probably not go back to it at any time soon. The big advantage is flexibility, because your stays are short, visas are usually easy to get, and you have no lease, you have no schedule. You hear about an interesting place, and you're like, hey, I'm just gonna go. If you're curious about going to Tanzania, you just book a flight and then you're there. The problem is, as I mentioned, it just gets a little bit tiring after a while. You're constantly making the same decisions, like where to go next and where you stay once you land, what visa you're gonna get, and you have all these time zone differences, and it just gets a little bit exhausting after a while. So those were the 4 strategies. Number 1 is Expat, number 2 is Snowbird, number 3 is Slowmad, and number 4 is Nomad. So how do you actually choose which one fits you? So here are a few simple questions to figure out which part would actually fit you. First, you want one place that feels like home, or do you like the idea of waking up somewhere new every couple of months? Secondly, what does your budget look like? Running 2 homes on a Snowbird costs the most, while setting into one cheaper country makes the money last the longest. Thirdly, how often do you need to get back to see your kids or, for example, grandkids? 4, how is your health? Do you need the same doctors at the same pharmacy close by every time? Number 5 is, do you feel comfortable living out of a suitcase? And number 6 is, how much energy do you have for packing and setting up everything over and over again? And lastly, if you're doing it with a partner, what do they want? Their answer counts just as much as yours. A nomad life can sound exciting in your 50s, and it can feel exhausting once you're actually living in your 60s. None of these 4 paths is better than the other, but one of them probably fits your life better than the rest. If you want more honest advice about moving abroad as an American, subscribe to the channel and leave your questions in the comments.